All right, so move on to the next segment. I'll be sharing my thoughts on Terrence Crawford retiring from the sport of boxing. So, Terrence Crawford decided to hang it up earlier last week, and now is riding off to the sunset into retirement. So, my thoughts of Terrence Crawford retiring from the sport of boxing. Terrence Crawford had one hell of a boxing career. I think he has claimed himself to be the best fighter since Floyd Mayweather has retired from the sport of boxing back in 2017. I mean, Terrence Crawford had one hell of a career. 42 victories, 31 victories come away of knockout, three-time undisputed champion in three different weight classes, the first male boxer to ever accomplish that in boxing history, five-division world champion, took over five different divisions as a five-division world champion, and finished out on top because he was the number one ranked pound for pound king in the sport of boxing. There, he went out on top as world champion. He made the two biggest fights of his career look very easy and made those guys look ordinary in there. You look back at his fight in the summer 2023 against Earl Spence. He dropped Earl Spence three times in the sport in that boxing ring. And that was the first time we ever seen Earl Spence, one of the best welterweights of this era, get dropped pillar to post three different times in the boxing ring, outclass, outbox Earl Spence, putting the power on him, and made Earl Spence quit and get knocked out. Then you look at his fight against Canelo a few months ago. He moved up two weight classes to fight the best super middleweight champion of all time in Canelo Alvarez. That was the most comfortable Canelo has been weight-wise in his career at 168. And what did he do? He outclassed and outboxed Canelo Alvarez, made him look ordinary, made him look very frustrated in that boxing ring. And at that point, I don't think there was anything else for Terrence Crawford to accomplish because he was already undisputed in three different weight classes. He had nothing to prove. A rematch against Canelo, he just would have knocked out Canelo Alvarez and would have been a waste for everybody's time. You just would have seen the same outcome, and he just would have knocked out Canelo Alvarez. And he was rumored to go down to middleweight at 160, but the unified 160 fight between Lara and Janibek got caught popping dirty. So when that happened, the unified championship fight that was supposed to take place on the Lamont Roach and Isaac Cruz card, that went up in flames, and Lara is not a fighter that Terrence Crawford would chase at this point of his career because Lara is like 42, 43 years of age. I don't think Terrence Crawford would be interested really in getting that fight because it's not a big money fight. So there was nothing for him to do at 160. He wasn't going back down to 154 as much as people wanted to see a fight between himself and Jaron Ennis. It just wasn't going to happen. So there was nothing for him to do. Now, if you look at Terrence Crawford's career, the only regret I have of Terrence Crawford's career is his run at welterweight. Now, don't get me wrong. He had a good run at welterweight. For most of his welterweight run, he was the WBO champion until he became undisputed, defeating Earl Spence. Now, his run at welterweight was good. Don't get me wrong. Again, holding the WBO title, knocked out all of his opponents at welterweight, and then became undisputed, knocking out Earl Spence. But due to the fact that it was so complicated from like 2017 to 2023 to make cross-promotional fights is one of the reasons why I do feel like it was one of the biggest regrets of Terrence Crawford's career, his run at welterweight, because he was stuck over at ESPN Top Rank with Bob Arum. Bob Arum did not allow Terrence Crawford to get the big-time fights, unfortunately. You look at him being signed with Top Rank, he missed the opportunity to fight Manny Pacquiao. Bob Arum didn't allow Terrence Crawford to fight Manny Pacquiao, and he didn't allow Terrence Crawford to cross the street. And Bob Arum refused to do business with the PBC and Al Heyman. So Terrence Crawford is holding the WBO on one side of the street. All the other titles are scattered around at welterweight, and most of the action, most of the squabble and the smoke was taking place on the PBC. I wish we could have seen Terrence Crawford fight guys like Manny Pacquiao welterweight. I think Crawford would have won that fight, but I still would have liked to see it. I would have loved to see Terrence Crawford versus Danny Garcia. I think he would have knocked out Danny Garcia, but that would have been another name to add to Terrence Crawford's resume. Can you imagine if it was Terrence Crawford that took the undefeated record from one-time Keith Thurman instead of Manny Pacquiao defeating Keith Thurman? These are the different outcomes that I wish we could have seen. Terrence Crawford versus Ugas. I think Terrence Crawford knocks out Ugas as well, but that could have been another fun fight. Or Mikey Garcia. I think that's the only regret I have of Terrence Crawford's illustrious boxing Hall of Fame career. If Bob Arum just did business with Al Heyman and let him cross the street to do work with the PBC. And I think that's one of the reasons why people were fed up waiting for so long to get the Terrence Crawford and Earl Spence fight, a fight that to some we could have got years before Earl Spence went through the car accidents and section. By any means, that's not an excuse that Earl Spence lost that fight. I don't want you guys to think that. But we could have got that fight possibly like 2019, like 2022, not waiting till the summer of 23. That's how long it took because Terrence Crawford even had to escape Top Rank. If you guys remember his last fight against Sean Porter, he had to leave Top Rank at that point because he knew he wasn't going to get the best fights that he wanted at welterweight unless he left that promotion. So that's the only regret I have of Terrence Crawford's boxing career. You could say maybe it would stay longer at 154, but 154 was always a pit stop, guys. It was just to collect the title for Israel Madrimov and then move on to possibly fight Canelo, because that's what he kept preaching about for years and years and years, just wanting that big payday against Canelo. It finally paid off. There's just nothing else for Terrence Crawford to do. Again, he's a Hall of Famer, one of the best fighters that I've ever seen in my lifetime, and definitely deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame. Definitely has earned the right to say he's been the best fighter since Floyd Mayweather retired back in 2017. But those are my thoughts on Terrence Crawford retiring from the sport of boxing.